Today is March 23rd, 2001. We're in Dallas, Texas at my home. I am David Scott Carr, and this is my mother, Louella Kathleen Pipes Carr. And I'm only jumping over here because we've done interviews like this before, and I've never gotten in the frame, and it's kind of weird to hear this disembodied voice and never see it. So I'm going to go back out of the frame, but this just helps a little bit, I think. Okay. So, oh no, I just lost my questions. Okay. Again, your full name is?
Louella Kathleen Pipes Carr. I am the second of 5 Kathleens in my family.
Oh, that's right. And your name is a combination of your grandmother's names, Maddie Lou Smith and Ella May Holzenbach. Louella.
One word.
Yeah. Okay, and your parents are?
Dorothy Kathleen Donnell Pipes, James Robert Pipes.
Of Crystal City, Texas.
Of Crystal City.
So starting with them, how did the two of them meet? Because Granddaddy, your father, came from East Texas. He came down to South Texas to Crystal City, where Grandma Dorothy is from. Mm-hmm. How did they meet?
The president of the bank in Crystal City at that time was Bruce Holzenbach, who is a first cousin to my grandmother, Ella May Deese, and my aunt, Effie Elizabeth Akers, and my uncle, Lee Newton Holzenbach. And he came down at the invitation of Bruce Holzenbach and began working in the bank. So he was the new guy in town. Mother was 6 years younger and had various jobs, working in the grocery store and the drugstore at the time. But as time went on, they did meet. They dated over 6 years before they married. And they were married for, I believe they married in 1938, and I was born in 1941.
They married in 1938 on her birthday?
December 22nd.
1938, right. And let's see, who were their friends? What did they like to do together? Who did they hang out with?
They're both very social. I believe that Flo and Bill Smither were probably the couple friend that they had the most. But they enjoyed doing things together. They hunted, they fished, worked in the yard. They did a lot of things together. So they weren't just a completely social kind of couple. But I do remember that name especially from my childhood.
Okay. And who were there, because I know Granddaddy's father died when he was just a boy.
18 months old.
Yeah. And I know Grandma's father kind of had issues sometimes. So just with all that in consideration, as they're a young couple, and even on to when they're having children, who were their influences? What kind of shaped the parents and adults and married couple and parents that they were?
They both goaled to be the best parents and individuals that they could be. They did not come from elite circumstances. They knew that they had to make themselves and make their way on their own. My grandfather Pipes was killed when my father was like 18 months old, so he had no role model that lived in the home. Uncle Lee Holzenbach was a very strong influence on him in ways of moral character and judgment and integrity and so forth. But as far as hands-on, I don't recall that he ever had anyone. The world was, I've been told that at 14 he was helping to support my grandmother. He had jobs through high school and so forth. My mother grew up in a big family with multiple issues, from illness to spinal cord injury to other very difficult situations to live with. And as it would be probably not recognized in this period of time, but it was said that my grandfather was the best spinach planting person in Zavala County, that he could lay a spinach row straight as a die. So those were the simple type foundations that they came from. Daddy had a thirst for education, for bettering himself, for travel, reading, so forth, and he just brought her along with him as he did that to help grow her out of the plateau that she was when she was just a high school graduate, and so was he. And they took pride in staying out of debt. They took pride in their home and the way it was maintained. They took pride in who they were, their conduct.
And I'm sorry, but getting back to, wasn't he very involved in the community?
He became completely and devoted to the community. He was in all kinds of civic planning, zoning commissions, and so forth. And she likewise, although she had a full-time job, did not have the freedom to be as involved as he, because she worked full-time, had a home, and then had my sister Susan and I to raise.
Okay, on that note, so we approach October 17th, 1941. You are born. Where's the family home at this time? Where are you guys living?
On Nueces Street. I don't remember the number, but it was a small house on the corner of Nueces and 5th, as I have been told. And as time evolved, they bought a home a block away at 703 East Nueces.
On the same street.
Same street, same neighbors, which was very typical of our time.
Okay, and that's the home they lived in until they left Crystal City.
Until they left Crystal City.
Okay. And then moving forward a few years, March 4th, 1945, your sister Susan Elizabeth Pipes is born.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're just 3.5 years old, so you don't have any memory of her birth, do you?
I have some vague. I do remember pushing her. She was in a big black carriage, and I do remember pushing her off of the porch, and the carriage dumping her out, and the bedlam that took place after that. I remember that vividly. I don't remember a lot of incidences as vividly as I remember that.
Okay.
But we were raised as very close little sisters.
Yeah.
She's irreplaceable in my life.
Oh, of course. And so who are your friends? And I'm talking about, because you know how sometimes you can have friends like when you're like this, and then you kind of evolve and you might have different friends in junior high and high school and stuff. Let's start at the beginning. Who are your childhood running buddies?
Catty corner to us, and still on Nueces Street, was Patricia Ray. She was born about 3 weeks after I, and to this day, we're both past 79 years old. We're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
In school, and as much especially in a rural small school, there isn't as much changing and so forth. My whole graduating class was 42.
Mm.
So I had pretty much the same friends all through school.
The whole stretch.
The whole stretch. And because we didn't change neighborhoods, we didn't move, and because my parents did not have a job that necessitated our moving periodically, I lived there on Nueces Street, 703 East Nueces, until I went away to school.
And as we mentioned just a second ago, you're 3.5 years older than Tia, your sister Susie, which as a kid, that's a pretty big gulf, right? So did y'all have like distinct sets of friends, or did that kind of mix together
It
some?
all kind of meshed together. And she was always, perhaps the influence of an older sister, I don't know, but she was just a more grown up than most of her childhood playmates, and she was at ease and fit in with my friends.
She was mature.
She was mature. And she also had a beautiful gift of just being happy, period. She had a horse. She spent hours and hours a day on her horse. She had a BB gun. She spent, who would know?
Where was her horse kept?
In our backyard. Of course.
Okay.
There was a lot in our backyard, which at the time we were little girls was where they kept their milk cow.
Mm.
But it was fenced with an electric fence, and her horse was there.
You know, when you go ahead.
And she would get up early in the morning before anyone was up, put on her little blue jeans, and she was gone till she was hungry. And if she went to town, our old dog followed her, and if Mother or Daddy was looking for her, you could just call the different merchants and say, is the black dog there? And it would mean Susie was on that street.
What was the dog's name?
Butch.
Butch. Just real quick, when you mentioned her maturity, this is a little bit of an interlude, but it reminded me of such a funny story that Uncle Ronnie told. I think I told you this a few years ago. He, just to try to get straight to the punchline, he said something about, he was talking about himself, and I always knew in my head they were in the same graduating class. And he said something about his birthday or something like that, and I go, oh yeah, in 1945. He goes, no, I was born in 44. I go, but you're in the same class as Tia, my aunt. And he goes, yeah, we were in the same class. She's a year younger. And I go, well, how did that work? He goes, well, Bob Pipes graduated her above. He felt like she was mature enough to go to the next level. So and he just looked, he said that with such a dry look, like, well, Bob Pipes decided she needed to skip a grade and go on. So that's why she was in our class now.
That could easily have been true.
Okay, so I get it. Okay, you kind of touched on a little bit of what I was going to ask next, just kind of describing your home and growing up. Like, you all did not have a television, is that right?
No.
No television?
No air conditioner.
No AC?
Until I was gone from home, only one air conditioner, refrigerated air conditioner, in one bedroom. That was in 1961.
So what was an ordinary day like? Like when you came home from school and you're going into the evening, for the past, I don't know how many decades, it's kind of been common in an American family, like kids will plop down in front of the TV or something like that. Like, no TV, no kind of external stimulation, whatever. What did you guys do on an ordinary night?
Well, there was a rule set in stone equal to the ones that Moses brought down from the mountain. You did not play until your homework was done. And it was based on your integrity to get it done. They did not walk in at 5 or 5:30 with homework to be supervised. It was done, period. It wasn't a debate topic. It was done. After that, we played in the yard. We rode bicycles. We had long games that were dramas and drawn out.
Yeah.
And at night we would lay in the grass and watch the lightning bugs and look at the constellations. And in the summer times, we swam hours and hours and hours a day, but there was no program. Perhaps we went to Bible school, vacation Bible school, but there was no civic center, there was no Little League, there was no, it was up to us to you just didn't walk in and say, I'm bored.
Right.
You just did.
Yeah.
You'd probably get a chore if you admitted to that. You just played a lot. You were outside, playing in the sprinkler, playing, the roads were not all paved. You just play in the mud. I mean, that probably sounds extremely simple, but it was a beautiful, wonderful part of my
Oh yeah, no, it sounds great.
growing up. And consequently, I have friends today all over Texas, of course, and in many other states that we're still friends with, where if they walked in the room, it would be like yesterday that we had seen each other.
Feel like you're back in those moments.
Back in those moments, and we still say that. We still say and agree we were born in the best time in the world and the best place in the world. The village raised kids. Your behavior was expected. Good behavior was expected everywhere. You were not given
Latitude.
at all.
Yeah.
But certainly not every. If you got in trouble at school, believe me, it beat you home. There was no problem about having to stand up and tell what happened. It was already been delivered.
No parental defense attorneys.
To my knowledge, they would have had a hard time dealing with my daddy.
Did you all in your home eat dinner together, or
Every
did you
night.
and Tia like kind of eat over like?
Every night, all four of us sat down at a small table in a small kitchen. Mother's a wonderful cook. Not a gourmet cook. She was cornbread and biscuits and
Good stuff.
fried potatoes and so forth. But we sat down and Daddy presided at the table. And Saturday night you ate a little bit early and he brought the radio in. And we listened for probably 2 hours to the serial radio
Oh yeah.
programs that came on.
Nice.
It followed them from week to week. It was just great.
And when they have friends over and stuff sometimes, and
Yes, they did. Friends mostly were people that Daddy interacted with in his civic duties, like Sam Anderson. They were on planning and zoning together for many years. Flo and Bill were mostly their social social friends. And the neighbors, this was typical in the 40s and 50s. Neighbors brought their chairs over. And Daddy kept a beautiful yard. And especially in the spring, we had a row of 5 or 6 citrus trees, and it just smelled heavenly. And the neighbors would bring their chairs over. And they would sit there till dark, or when the mosquitoes were bad or so forth. And kids were in the street, in the yard, doing whatever. You did not interrupt the conversation in the circle of the adults, bleeding or not. You just didn't do it. But that was every night. You just, their next door neighbors were neighbors from the time that I was about 10 or 12 years old up until we left. The Clarks, they came over, brought their chairs. They're from the side. Walpoles came over from in front of where we lived. Charlie Walpole and Daddy fished many, many years together. Flo and Bill would come down. The Andersons would come over. It wasn't that there was such a huge difference in them. It was just the same kind of people all the time.
yeah. Did Granddaddy teach you how to drive?
Oh yes. Really early. Really early. I think I've been told I was like 8 or 9.
I'm sure it was clutch and
Oh yes, clutch.
standard. Yeah.
Definitely. And we backed in and out of the garage at least 5,000 times a day until we were able to back out and drive up to the street and put it back where it was.
And who were your favorite teachers, your influential teachers, people that really still are fresh in your memory that made an impact?
I can still remember my grammar school teachers. And a distinctive thing that I remember, and I do not say this critically, I just remember the difference. Our teachers were impeccably dressed. They had makeup They had beautifully kept hands, wore dresses, hose, heels every day. Our principal had on a tie. It was an atmosphere that lent itself to respecting them. And those were my grammar school years. I went to a 2-story brick grammar school, and the terror of my life was having to go down the fire escape from the second floor. That was.
Was it that big slide?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Just horrible.
Oh.
And then junior high, we began in the old school buildings of the internment camp.
The internment camp where the federal government interned Germans, Japanese, and some Italians during World War II.
During World War II. And many of those people stayed in Crystal City after the war was over.
Some of the internees.
But in junior high, we were introduced to football and basketball and those kind of competitive sports. And I was fortunate enough to be a cheerleader in junior high, to wear the green and gold and go out of town to football. Exactly. Go out of town to football games and so forth. And then the big step was to high school, which was in fact the high school that my mother had gone to.
Oh, wow.
And lined up and down the hall were pictures of the graduates since the first graduating class. So that was just a very respected part of going to high school. In high school, outstanding teachers were lead lines in English. Most of us went to college and took entrance exams, and some of us got automatic A's. We were ready.
Yeah.
Temple Ray was an exemplary math teacher, and those boys in my class who were really gifted learners just did extra and extra and extra things under his guidance. I love history, so standing out to me was Evelyn Kingsbury, because she loved history, and history was never hard to me. I loved it. And I was fortunate enough to be the drum major of the Fightin' Javelina band for 2 years, which was just wonderful. I wore a fur shako about this big on my head and had a long baton that I once knocked that thing sideways. I was waving it around sideways. It almost took me off my feet. But I did live over that and did continue to wear it. But we had an outstanding band director. And many kids, the 4 years that I was in high school as they graduated, got music scholarships.
Oh, wow.
He was very, very directed toward helping kids with talent go on to be able to use their talent.
Yeah.
A lot of them became band directors, and it was a very good experience. Not to say that it didn't have the same issues that you have today, just learning to live together and the petty things that go on.
It wasn't a complete Xanadu.
Exactly.
But it was awfully good.
It was awfully good, and every single one of us looks back and says it was good.
It was fondness, yeah.
It was good. We didn't have a heart, or I don't know how we were singly blessed to be this way, but we didn't have a heart to exclude people.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a heart to do that. Or like, if your daddy was a mechanic, you didn't run with the...
Didn't matter.
Didn't matter. We were just all kids, and we probably were 15 years behind Dallas, for instance, but it was good. It was good. We had a good town. We had a prosperous town. For as small as it was, we were fortunate to have California Packing Company, Del Monte, come into the town and build an enormous factory, cannery, and they bought thousands of acres and raised their own produce, beans, beets, turnips, all kinds of fresh vegetables, carrots, etc. And they were taken care of beautifully. They lived in homes far superior, what they had at home. Their meals were catered, by Armandina Galvan, and she fed them well. You could go out there and eat with the Prosettos and not feel like that you had.
You're talking about the people that work the fields.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They came over with what they called mikas at the time, or the period of time that growing and harvesting the crop was, and then they could go back across and renew their mikas and come back. So it was a revolving thing, but they appreciated the work and they did it well, as did people in town. Probably 85% of the women in Crystal City who worked at Del Monte in the accounting departments and so forth. Mm-hmm. But they made their own cans, then brought in their own fresh vegetables that they grew and that they contracted to other farmers in the immediate area. And that's where women worked. My mother worked at the post office, but that's where women worked, and it was good.
So again, during this time of prosperity and everything for the town, who were like the civic leaders of Crystal City? Who's kind of at the helm of this community going forward?
Daddy, very definitely. Sam Anderson, very definitely. Royce Cook. Lloyd Williams, city manager. Bruce Hosenbach at that time was the mayor, and I don't remember that. He really became active as he was getting older, but he was supportive of good things happening. Those are the immediate things that come to my mind. Mm-hmm. Our school system was very strong, very, very strong. And we graduated kids that went to college and could compete with kids out of city schools.
Yeah.
We were proud. We were proud of our town.
On the school note, so 1960 you graduate Crystal City High School. You decided to go to nursing school in San Antonio. What drew you to the nursing profession? I had never doubted at all for many years to think that I would be a doctor, and then to step that down a little bit and decide that if I wanted to be a mother, which I did, a doctor was a hard profession to be in and be a very hands-on mother. So I chose nursing, and by that time, although limitedly, nurses were going into specialties like they were learning to be anesthesiologists. They were not as much or even comparable to today, but they were beginning to be trained beyond just Bachelor of Arts degree nurses. But in my day and time, you finished all of your college requirements and then went to nursing school. And nursing school was hands-on in the hospital, 6:30 every morning. Mm-hmm. Starched apron, starched cap. Yeah.
White shoes and hose. Aprons that would stand up.
So you become a nurse, moving forward a little bit forward from there. June 19th, 1964, you married Charles Sidney Carr. Senior of Crystal City as well. It was supposed to be a double wedding with your sister.
In 1961, I received one of the most definite blessings of my life. the roommate chosen for me was Sharon Hall Coon. We are to this day the dearest of friends. She is a star in my life, most definitely, and I feel she makes me feel like I am in hers. So many good things came from nurses training. Lots of growing up, lots of challenge, lots of just sheer determination. But she stands out to me, needing to be mentioned when you talk about my days as a nurse.
Yeah.
We were roommates 21 months.
And where's she originally from?
San Antonio.
Oh, she's from right there. Okay.
San Antonio.
Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. Okay, and I had said a second ago, I'll repeat again. So moving ahead a little bit past that, June 19th, 1964, you married Charles Sidney Carr Sr. Supposed to be a double wedding with your sister, but she elopes with her husband Andrew Todd Oliver of San Saba, Texas, while they were at Texas Tech. Granddaddy did not receive this news very well, having planned a double wedding that summer, right?
The double invitations were already addressed.
Oh. Okay.
That wedding date was snake bit from the onset. We first decided on June the 20th. And the first amendment to that was the elopement. So Charles and I stayed with June the 20th, and the vocalist for our wedding was to have been a woman who called about 6 weeks before the wedding and said she was going to leave for Europe that day. And so, because she was very much involved as friends, long-term friends with Charles's older sister Annette and husband Harold, we changed the date to the 19th to accommodate her leaving. And then she left on the 16th.
So it was snake bit.
It was like throwing a dart on your shoulder. But it did happen on a Friday night, Juneteenth, which has been a joke forever. It was just the way it happened.
Yeah. And so who was in your wedding? Who were the girls in your? I'm sure Tia was your maid of honor, right?
She was.
And go down the line from there.
Doris Gump Hopper, who was a nursing friend. Betty Walters, who was a nursing friend. Do you know Tina Holzenbach Milson, who was a cousin, and Joyce Harkey Wynn, who was a junior bridesmaid. She was Charles's niece.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And okay, so you're settling in, newlyweds. Kids come pretty quick. The first one, Susan Kathleen Carr in 1965.
Third Kathleen.
Third Kathleen. Charles Sidney Carr Jr. in 1966. And then, of course, your pride and joy in 1970.
Exactly. Who really was the baby to the whole family. I mean, he had two sets of parents. It was like,
Yeah.
it was such a big baby. Susie would want to hold him, and so we would set her on the couch and put a pillow on her lap. She was so little, and he would hang both sides of her lap and the pillow. She was trying to put her little arms around him.
But
she did adore him.
Was it my elephantine size at 10 pounds and 13 ounces that made you realize no more kids, or was it just the perfection that you had finally achieved?
Both.
Okay. Okay, and so now your 3 children have provided you with 8 grandchildren. Sarah Kathleen George.
The fourth Kathleen.
Fourth Kathleen. Jenna Kendall George.
Morgan
Tyler Bean. Those are all Susie's kids.
Mm-hmm.
Sid and his wife Gretchen have Olivia.
Lorraine.
Carr.
Savannah.
Kathleen Carr,
and Walter Meyer.
and Walter Meyer Carr. Okay, and then Jennifer and I have Jed Sidney Carr and James Scott Carr. Okay.
Now, to be mentioned there, I have 3 biologic children. I have 6 children. I acquired 3 other children at the time of my sister's death. It had been a promise that we made to each other many years ago and rededicated between us many times. I have James Todd Oliver and Wesley Andrew and Will Robert Oliver as my children now too.
That's right. Yeah.
And I have their 6 grandchildren, and they are my grandchildren too. And then I have 3 great-grandchildren
Yes.
that are the icing on the cake.
Well, I know you're supposed to be doing most of the talking here, but I'll just interject this. Grandma, your mother, was a living saint. We loved her beyond description. She was the greatest thing in the world.
An offspring of a saint.
Yes.
My big mama.
You're a big mama. And I don't think it's going out on a limb to say that your grandchildren feel the same way about you.
I hope so.
So that's a good segue to what I was about to get to, because these are, kind of the broad strokes of the life, growing up, going to nursing school, getting married, having kids, having grandkids. But let's go back and kind of fill in a little more on the special people and kind of start at the beginning. Big, you just said. So this is your mother, this is your maternal grandmother. You affectionately referred to her as Big Mama. And tell us a little bit about what made her so endearingly special.
She had the most presence of peace about her, even though her life had been extremely sad and hard. She had the most loving, accepting, non-judgmental aura about her all the time. I don't remember any time of having any explosions with her. She was a servant. She was a servant to those around her. She had little education, but she loved to read her Bible and did very religiously. She knew that we loved her, and loved her just because she was big. She could be counted on, always counted. Everybody that knew her thought that they were her favorite.
Mm-hmm.
She was successful at doing that.
And you spent a lot of time with her?
A lot of time with her.
Yeah.
And the dedication she had to the son who was spinal cord injured and crippled.
His name?
Mac,
Mm-hmm.
Donnell. And the hurt in her life, to see his life so compromised, and then to have to see her lose him at a relatively early, it's not an early age for a spinal cord injured patient. It was an early age in his life.
Right.
He had a voice like a songbird. Everyone in town loved to hear him sing, and he would be invited from church to church to church to sing.
Mm.
Yeah.
And your paternal grandmother, we always heard her referred to as Granny Deese, but I doubt you called her that. What did
That's
you?
what we called her.
You called her Granny
Yes.
Deese?
And distance is the only reason that I don't have the history with her that I have with Big. We lived in the same town at Big. We rode our bikes down to Big's. We got out of school and walked 4 blocks to Big's house. Granny Deese lived in Dallas, and at that time the speed limit was 55. If you've ever driven from the Mexican border to Dallas, you'll be quite aware that's a long way. But she was a marvelous seamstress, known very much for how beautifully she could sew. And that was pretty much how she made her living and took care of Daddy, being widowed at such a terribly early age.
Yeah. Well, in our family, like if you ask me this question, like who are your closest family members, outside of your immediate family, or who are your closest family members? It's a real easy answer to us, like the Olivers are, the Oliver boys are like brothers to us, so that's, we were raised that way with them all the time, and that's the close family connection that we have. So when you and T are growing up, who do you have? Cousins? Do you have, how do you answer that question?
We have cousins, yes, but we had like third cousins. We didn't have like you boys. As I've said many times, Susie and I had 6 babies in 7 years, and you were all raised in the same baby bed. That was the closeness that you had, and we traded clothes and baby beds and everything back and forth. We raised you like a little brothers and sister. On Big's side, it was a mixed family. She had 2 daughters. She was widowed. That's not right. She had 2 sons and was widowed very early. My grandfather had 2 daughters and was widowed early. When they married, they had 4. And as you can just imagine, the cousins and so forth that came on never were. I mean, we would gather at Big's house, and we knew they were our cousins and so forth, but it was nothing like you all growing up with the Oliver boys. And we had no family on Daddy's side except third cousins, 2 little girls, Penny and Patty, and
Acres.
And our visits with them were as infrequent as our visits with our grandmother in Dallas. And Dallas is where we visited with those girls. So it was not a close growing up, but it was the only touch. We had other wholesome back girl cousins, but they were much older and married and left and didn't live in Crystal City, and it just happened that way. So we, Susie and I, really didn't have a lot of family like you all have.
Yeah. Focusing on your father, Granddaddy, he was so respected by everyone. I've never heard a single bad word mentioned about him. How would you describe your relationship with him? Were there times where there was a sternness, like there was?
It was always there.
Yeah.
And it sounds like an oxymoron, but
Could
it was.
You talk to him about anything?
Anything. And I don't care what we girls were doing, he was there. I remember especially the years that I was drum major. Never missed an out-of-town game. Never missed anything. But the sternness was always there. But it was in a protective way. We would butt heads, undoubtedly we would butt heads. But he prevailed, and I've told him many times, you were so right. But I think he was so desperate to be the father that he never had, and to put the parameters in place that made us behave and be respectable and accountable. And his expectations of us were very high. We both were expected to make stellar grades. And each of those things that he did, I really believe, were things that he had wished were in place for him. I felt like everything he did with intensity was to make up for things he didn't get to have.
So all of that, the expectations, the sternness, and all of that, never made you feel like you couldn't approach him about it?
Never.
Okay.
Never. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Never. He passed on how he wore hair. I mean, he didn't dictate it. You wanted him to accept it.
Yeah.
Who took you to the prom? What your dress was like? It never was ask your mother. He was very involved in all of it.
Well, in addition to that part of his personality, was he a funny guy? Did he?
Had a very dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
And he was a born orator, just never in a role to exercise that. But he attracted people. You just knew that if there were something that needed to be weeded out or done, if you put it on Bob's plate, it was going to get done right.
He was a magnetic leader.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I don't know that it's appropriate or not, but he, to an extent, was a perfectionist. He just felt like if you put the effort into doing something, why not do it right? Do you want to sign your name to that?
Right. What all these a number of things that he helped build your character and do all these things. What characteristic or important lesson do you think that you carry from him throughout your life? I'm sure you carry many, but are there some that kind of rise to the top that, like, I think that's from my father. He really helped instill that in me.
Mm-hmm. To realize that your decisions were something that you didn't pick or choose to follow you through life. When you made a decision, make it with the future in mind. And I think the dependence I had on him was the fact that you could always depend on his integrity. And as my children and my little boys and Susie's little boys came along, he did that same thing with them. It was just an expectation of granddaddies that you do so. But it was not a yoke. I think there's a difference between a yoke of burden
Sure.
and accountability, and he managed them well.
That's a great way to put it. On your mother's side, Grandma, I would imagine the relationship was quite different. How would you describe your relationship with her?
I had a lot of resentment because she couldn't be a stay-at-home mother. She was a working mother, so you came home to an empty house, and you had responsibilities when you got home. Your room had to be clean, the dishes had to be washed. Maybe she wanted you to start supper, get in your studies, and so forth. And I just had a probably misplaced resentment about all the kids that went home to a mother that, was waiting there, or who had picked them up at school. And we went home to an empty house all the time. And I carried that for a long, long time. And it really wasn't her fault. It was her role. The role that she was walking out. As it were, probably because I was the older, Daddy spent a lot of time with me. And I had a more comfortable, trusting kind of relationship with Daddy than I had with Mother until she got older. And as she got older, she just became another big.
Mm-hmm.
And the roles were changed. She's the child, and I'm the mother.
Yeah.
Being sure that she's never alone and so forth.
Yeah.
And that was Susie's and my blessing to be able to walk with her through the end of her life and take care of her personally and oversee the care that we had for her. So it was just a thing that I had as a young person.
But like you said, you had such a long period of time to have a different experience, with her, and because Granddaddy dies in 1977, you're just in your early 40s. That's relatively young, it's kind of cut short in some respects. But you've got Grandma for many years after that, and it's a much different situation during that period.
And she was loving to all 6 of the grandchildren, and they all just fought to be with her and just stay with her. She was giving. There were so many things that, although she was not wealthy, she had the privilege and the opportunity to do for other people. It was forever after she was gone that people would tell Susie and me the things that she had done.
She's so generous, yeah.
So generous and so loving and so compassionate. She may not agree, but she was compassionate to the circumstance.
So many of the good solid lessons, the honor, the integrity that you received from your father. What are some important lessons? What are some characteristics? What are some things that Grandma shaped in you?
She was the second voice of everything he put in place. I never ever remember a time in my growing up years that there was any conflict between them about anything. She might have been handed the manners and the hygiene and those things that women need to be trained, but Daddy set the standard and she agreed with it, and she didn't fight it, and she didn't allow us to fight it.
They were a unified front.
They were a unified front,
Total
but she
simple.
definitely walked a little behind by her choice.
And a role she was comfortable with.
It's a role she was comfortable with. We all trusted him.
Yeah.
We all trusted him. Susie had a little bit more problem, and she probably has a little bit more in her character of independence than I do or did. And so she had a little bit harder time having a deep relationship with Daddy that I had. But she was very close to Mother. Very, very close.
Which grandchild do you think is their favorite? You just point this way if you want to. Okay.
If there's anyone in the room,
yeah.
you can point.
Okay. I got it. It's
You know, I think that was another
now
success
recorded
that
for
she
posterity.
had. I really don't think she saw a difference.
I don't either.
She was a master
Yeah.
at keeping that in place. She was a master at that.
It will forever be a punchline, but there's no doubt that it's
Right.
she felt the same among everybody. So
And that game still exists. Walter decided a long time ago that he was favorite, so anytime he has an audience, he'll say, my grandchild spent more time with you than any of the others, maybe.
I can hear that. Okay, and then now we're kind of coming in full circle a little bit with your sister. Among the many talents and qualities that she had, which are the ones that you think capture her essence the best? You talked about her individualism, she had a real sweetness about her.
And a firmness.
Oh yeah, for sure, especially the early version of her. But what do you think are the things that kind of capture her the best? Like, what are the traits or qualities that best describe her essence?
It's difficult to draw a line and sever her from me. It's just always been like we were one. Where I might have been a little bit caustic and critical, she would be broad-minded. Where I might not have the quality to stand up to a situation and handle it, she hit everything head on. Those were sort of dramatic differences we had. But I never trusted anyone, I never loved anyone, I never admired anyone. She's so irreplaceable. So irreplaceable. And I was telling Jennifer only today, she said, where do you shop? And I said, I don't know how to shop. Tia and I always shopped. We shopped together, and my strengths were her weaknesses. I never did have to worry about looking at all of this array of stuff. We would just hit what we were looking for because we just thought that way. And we used to go shopping, and we would be in a checkout place in line, and the cashiers would say, "Are y'all twins?" And she's such a twitch. Sometimes she'd say, "Yeah," and sometimes she'd say, "Sometime," and sometimes she'd say, "No." But the sad thing was, the person checking us out would say, "I don't even know my sister's phone number. I don't want to know my sister's phone number. Do y'all shop together at the time?" All the time.
Well, and how do you think she would describe you?
As the person she depended on when her times got really tough, whether they were emotionally or relationship-wise, or certainly sick the last years. There were times that Jan would call me and I would go over in the night and she would be shaking. And she would take my hand and she'd say, "Lucy, I'm so afraid, I'm so afraid." And I would lay down with her and put my arms around her and pull her up close to me, and she'd go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that in a lot of ways, I wasn't the big sister, but in many ways, especially toward the end, I was the big sister, and she knew that nothing was going to get to her that didn't come over the top of a fighting lion.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you kind of answered the next question I was going to ask. Like, what do you think she relied on you the most for?
Again, I go to the later years: companionship, understanding, compassion, opinions. Even she was definitely the more business-minded one of us, but and she had a lot of not a lot, but she had some wonderful people in her business. But she always kind of seemed to round out her decision on what I thought about trends, or how you put an outfit together, or what kind of jewelry went with it, and so forth.
Well, I think this is a good place to kind of round out the conversation, like I said, with the four of you, because nobody knows what it was like to be the four of you from 1941 to 1960, because past that you're moving on to start families of your own, and that's special only to the four of you, and the four of you have had all of us, and all our families have grown and are continuing to grow, and all of that spawned from that experience of the four of you, and it's
now I'm the
so
only
special
one
to all of
standing.
us. Right.
And I'm grateful for that, because I would never have her know the degree of anguish and agony it is to lose the other. I would never have her know that.
Well, you are a special group, and I'm glad that we of course had these conversations countless times, but it's good to have a record of it for future generations. And we've got some photos around here that, if you'll just talk about this one real quick. You are coming home from the hospital, so this would be the house before 703 Nueces, is that right?
This would be the little house on the corner at Nueces, and I believe Fifth. But I believe this is the first Christmas. I think I was about 6 weeks. I think this was Christmas
yeah.
at Aunt Johnny's.
Oh, okay. Oh, so this is in Dallas.
I think this is our first trip to Dallas. I think I was about that about 6 weeks.
Yeah, you see the Christmas decorations in the background. Okay.
And of course, this is Daddy and Mother, and that was me. And I was no dainty baby. I was 9-13.
Oh.
I think of my little mother.
So we were talking about this photo here, and you were saying that's probably Aunt Johnny's house here in Dallas.
Yes.
And
My first Christmas.
First Christmas.
This was a 41.
December
Pearl Harbor
41.
had happened December 7th.
Yeah. And then Tia comes along in 45 at the end of the war, or just prior to the end of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And this photo is,
This photo is taken in Uncle Maurice's office in Austin. We were there, I believe, to go to a football game, as I recall. But obviously we were just teenagers.
I feel like you told me once that was like a wedding party thing, like a shower or something.
Well, maybe. If it's not, it's very similar, and I speak mostly to the white shirt and so forth that she is in. Maybe it was, but when I was having wedding showers, she was in Lubbock.
Okay, so so maybe that was.
So I'm not sure, but then I have on the typical.
But that would be what, like 1963, maybe?
I didn't graduate from nurses training until March the 6th of 64. So this would be 64.
Okay.
And she was at Tech.
All right.
With Mr. Andrew Todd all
Yes, before they ran off to Lovington. Okay, well, I think, is there anything we didn't cover?
I can't think of it. I've been so blessed. My life has been so blessed. And the summation, I believe it would be, that my life has been so blessed because I have so many things that some families don't have a clue what it's like to have. And to have doting, faithful, devoted parents, and then to have a sister through life like I did, and then to come along and have children that bond and stay together and love each other. Those things in a mother's heart are there's just not room for anything else.
What else is there?
What else is there? And then you add 14 grandchildren that are just wonderful, and 3 great-grandchildren. And my life has been so blessed.
Well, we couldn't agree more, and that's especially why we wanted to preserve this, because we just think the world of the 4 of you, and we're just so grateful that we come from the 4 of you, and you're really special people.
Thank you so much. The blessings still flow, for sure.
Adios.
Adios.
Okay. Gotta get stretched down here one more time.
Although I've seen this done in our family over and over and over, to be sitting here as
We're done. Please come turn it off. I don't know how to do it.
as the
Thanks.
matriarch, somewhat being interviewed is like the top rung. And it just kind of seems like, oh my gosh, what could I say that would be meaningful?
I think you did a great job. I think you covered it well.